this is a really interesting device. Like, when you first, the initial thoughts, right, when Samsung was going to make a Z Fold, and well, look, let's put it this way. We first knew that we got word that Apple was going to put out their foldable, right? And then you got word of the weird dimensions that this fold, it's not going to be your typical, it's not going to be like a Z Fold 7, right? Z Fold 6 that we're used to, right? Where it looks like a regular phone when it's closed, it just opens up. Apple's doing something completely different, and I think they did that on purpose, right? I think they did that on purpose to be different, and now we know it's going to be essentially the opposite. So if you take a phone, how Samsung's phone is, the Fold, just for people that don't know, I know most of y'all watching already know, but the Fold 7 is like a phone that just opens up into two phones. Apple's is essentially going to be like this, and then you just fold it shut. So it's going to be small, it's going to be wide, similar to the OG Pixel. Have no fears, I do have photos for everyone. Maybe I should just show those first before we get into trying to explain it. But Apple is going to have a foldable that really doesn't look like any other foldable. And as we mentioned, they're probably doing that on purpose. And then Samsung, copycats that they are going to make a similar product. Now, we got a few tips and or leaks that are going to make, now we're going to focus on Samsung's new foldable, not Apple's, but we got a few tips to why this is very intriguing, very interesting, and we're going to look at sales projections, right, where Samsung thinks they're going to sell this, and then possible release dates. But let's go ahead and jump into what this thing looks like, right, because now we kind of, there's been some graphics put together, and it looks pretty cool. So let me show you the first one here. That looks pretty cool. The first thing that stands out is the dimensions, right? It almost looks like a square, and it's gonna be, I know with Android apps taking you behind the scenes, I have an app on the App Store, and I've looked into how this app is going, my app, and I'm sure other developers, how their apps are going to look on these displays. It's basically going to be optimized already, right, to fit now I can tweak it on the back end, right, how I want stuff to kind of fit on these displays, because these are not typical phones. Your typical phone is a candy bar style phone, or it's a rectangle, right? It's the aspect ratios fairly common with every phone. Of course, there's some minor adjustments like the Z Flip 6 where it's really tall and slender. This is a whole nother story. This thing's damn near like a square. It's not, but I think it's going to benefit the user and or usability. And as I was mentioning, it's going to be up to the developers to kind of tweak their apps to get this screen size fine-tuned. Now, look at this. It's a 9:7 outer display. A 9:7 ratio outer display. It looks pretty cool, right? It looks really, really nice. Now, let's get to the inner display. You're going to have a 16:10 inner display that folds open. Now, I think this form factor, for me personally, I've never purchased a fold. I've purchased all the flips, right? Regular phone, like the old StarTax, right? I've had all the flips, but never went that extra mile and got a fold, just because I personally don't like the aspect ratio. I don't like the way it feels on my hand when you're holding it when it's closed. Now, the new one's different, the Z Fold 7, because it's so razor thin. When it's closed, it feels like you just have a normal phone. But I don't like the aspect ratio when you open it up. It's not like a tablet, right? It'd be one thing if it was like a tablet in a phone, which this new one is. So I think this new ratio is going to hit a sweet spot. The trifold that Samsung just released is too much. It's too much. Well, it's too much money. It's like $3,000, but it's almost too much to worry about. It's too much display to worry about, right? It's a freaking tablet you can fold up into your pocket. That's too much, right? I mean, look, everybody's different, but for me personally, it's too much, right? Like, what if you're sitting at a grocery store? Of course, you can use it like a regular phone, but folding it open into a tablet is too much. I think this is going to be the sweet spot for those of y'all like myself that don't really like the Fold 7, especially when it's opened up, or don't like the trifold that's basically like the size of a good sized tablet when you open it up. I think this is the sweet spot for a lot of people like myself that want a foldable, but just something's not right. I think this is it. I think Samsung has something. I've been looking at these pictures all day, and I'm like, you know what? I think Samsung has something on here, has something with this device. The trifold is an interesting concept. It's too expensive for the current market. Way too expensive. And it's kind of, when they say, oh, it's sold out in 2 minutes. Well, of course it's going to sell out in 2 minutes if you only make 200 of them, or 2,000. I don't know how many they made. Obviously more than 200, but I'm just saying it's not like they made 2 million of them, right? If you have a phone, a foldable that's $3,000, and realistically I think they made 200,000 of them, of course it's going to sell. They know. It's like Ferrari. Whenever they come out with a brand new model, a brand new car, they always produce one less than what they think they can sell, just to keep that supply and demand, try to keep it even, right? They want to supply the people that definitely want one, but they don't want to produce so many to where they got to drop the prices and it looks like they're struggling to sell them. So it was strategic for them to produce a decent amount. And look, it's a showstopper, especially on YouTube, online, on social media. The trifold, yeah, it looks cool, but realistically, I would be more worried about it carrying it around than enjoying the device, right? So again, this is a sweet spot. Now, let me show you what it looks like compared to other devices. So more similar to the OG Pixel Fold that came out, the original Pixel Fold that came out in 2023. That was when it first came out. It was a double take, right? Because you're like, that looks weird. I almost prefer the new Z Fold wide version than the old Pixel or the new Fold 7. Now that says Fold 8 because I think getting geared towards the future when these are going to be released, but it'll probably, the Z Fold 8, which is a future device, probably going to be right around the same dimensions as the current Fold 7. Essentially looks the same as this picture, but it gives you a good scope in comparison of what this new device looks like compared to the other ones. Obviously shorter, wider, but I think the real show-stopping experience is when you're going to be able to open this thing up, right? Now, when you open it up, boom, it's going to look like that. So you see what I mean? The Pixel Fold was a decent idea, but look, you got black bars on the top and bottom. It's kind of a weird, more of a square design for the Pixel Fold on the left. And with the with the Z Fold 7 on the right, that's more of a square. So the new Z Fold wide, Z wide fold, it looks like what a TV would look like, and or a a horizontal YouTube video would fit perfectly on there, right? It just looks like it's made for video and or content, more like a display monitor, more like a TV. You're not going to have these weird dimensions that you currently see with Google and Samsung in their current Fold 7 series. Now, let's look at this. So here's another mock-up of the display. Now, somebody brought up a good point on the last live stream. If you take the Z Fold 7, the device on the left, and you tilt it horizontally, so take the left Z Fold 7, tilt it to the right, or if I guess the left, either way, it might be similar dimensions to the Z wide fold on the right. However, when you first open it up out of your pocket, this is what they look like. So yeah, you could use the Fold 7 similarly if you rotate it. But I still don't think that would be perfect dimensions. And who wants to fumble over their phone every time when you open it up, right? So I still think the Z wide fold has an advantage that way as well. Because I was looking at this graphic earlier, and I was like, yeah, you could rotate the Z Fold 7 sideways. But then why would you want to do that? When you open up the phone, pull it out of your pocket, you're looking at your lock screen, you just want to open it up. You don't want to open it up and rotate it, right? Plus your home screen, everything, you just want to open it up, boom, you want to go. You want to rock and roll as soon as you open it, right? Even if you tilt it, it's still a little bit more wider, but not too much. Yeah. It looks like it might be good for 4x3 content, though. Certainly does. I'm waiting for that wide fold to come out. I am too. Now, before we get into these sales projections, which we'll do here in a minute, let's look at possible camera configuration and/or sensor configuration right now. These are just estimates, right? We don't know. And whoever put together this graphic, sorry, I don't have the originator of these graphics. Maybe I'll link it down below after this is done. But Z wide fold on the left, which looks like the side of a Z Fold 7, but the left side is supposed to be the new wide fold, and the Fold 8, which is on the right. So if Samsung, look, we don't know what the specs are. We only know a very few, I think, and I don't even know if I can say confirmed specs, but there's some aspects of this device that we have some solid concrete evidence that it'll have in tow, right? And what is that? Well, we do know it's going to have a flat display. So apparently the crease is gone. So Samsung is going to be supplying Apple with the very same OLEDs and/or displays for Apple's new foldable. Now, Apple is using a liquid metal hinge, which I believe we reviewed a month or two ago when that news came out that Apple's is going to be crease-free. Well, I don't know if Samsung partnered with Apple. I don't know. I do know Apple patented that hinge design. So if Samsung is using the same hinge design to make it a crease-free display when it's open, they would have to compensate Apple for using that patented technology. Or Samsung came up with their own crease-free technology hinge. I don't know which one it is, but from the research I've done, this is going to have a crease-free display, which is music to my ears. Now, the crease really doesn't bother me. When you're using a flip and or a fold, you really can't. I mean, look, can you tell it's there? Sure, if you're looking for it. But just regularly using the device, it's a non-factor to me. Now, I know some that have never used a foldable before. It might take a little it may take a little while to get used to. But coming from the very first foldable, I don't know if any of y'all watching have ever had a foldable. I used the very first foldables, I've had every flip dating back to 7 years ago. When the first one came out, there was a crease. It looked like a river running right down the center of the screen. Now it's 80% gone. So there's 20% of the crease where it used to be on the original flip. But I think removing that extra 20%, meaning you have a complete flat plane, I think is going to be a game changer. And I think we're going to really enjoy these foldables moving forward into the future with zero crease. But again, not like it bothers me now, but I think just not having it, whenever you scroll your finger up and down the screen, you can feel it. But visually, you don't really see it, right? Especially in dim light, because all you see is just a nice, beautiful OLED display. So we do know it will have a crease-free design. Now, Samsung really wants to compete and put this up there with the flagship foldables, and I think they do. They need to put The 200 megapixel sensor that they put in the Fold 7 and the one that they're putting in the S26 Ultra, which we're going to look at here in just a second, they need to put a 200 megapixel sensor in there, which I agree with this graphic. I think it needs that main sensor of 200 megapixels. That's their flagship sensor for their flagship devices. And I would hope they were going to put a 50 megapixel ultra wide like this graphic says. I hope they don't throw some 12 megapixels in there, which they've done, or a 10 megapixel telephoto sensor. They need to put the best sensors they can find in these devices. These are premium devices. People are, I'm sure, I don't know what this is going to be priced at, but it's not going to be cheap. I can tell you that. So I think Samsung needs to throw its customers a bone. Samsung just now in the current Fold 7 put flagship sensors in their devices. So with the older Fold 6, Fold 5, Fold 4, they put some shitty sensors in there, let's be honest. Even dating back to the Flip series, pretty bad sensors, right? I mean, it was not known for their photography. It was more known for the usability and fun, right? The enjoyment you get out of using a foldable. Those days are gone. You got to step your game up, or I think that's people, you know, are just simply not going to buy this if Samsung doesn't put their best foot forward in these specs, right? Now, moving on to specs, we'll get into a possible launch date and price. I think it's going to have probably the latest Snapdragon processor, right? It would be interesting though. What if Samsung chose to put their Exynos 2600 in here? It has that new heat bypass technology where it's not going to. So I think putting a very powerful processor in a very thin device, before these, that's something you'd worry about. The S25 Edge, that's what I worried about. Very powerful processor in a very thin device. Well, those processors generate a ton of heat, and trying to get rid of that heat is an issue when you have such a thin device, right? Where's that heat going to go? Samsung's new Exynos processors have a heat bypass technology. It's a new way that they pack their CPU. Essentially eliminates majority of the heat that the old processors, the way that they used to pack those processors, it eliminates a lot of that heat. It would be interesting if they put the 2600, Exynos 2600 in there, which they can do. We do know they haven't supplied all the latest flagship Samsung phones with their own processors because Samsung just can't make enough of them, right? Samsung's planning to sell millions upon millions of phones. Well, what if they're projecting the S26 Ultra to sell 12 million devices, but they can only make 6 million processors? There's an issue, right? So that's why they're doing a split release. Some S26s with with the Snapdragon processors, some with Exynos. But they're not going to make as many of these as you think, right? Because here are these sales projections. 1 million. 1 million. Now, they're going to they expect to sell 3.5 million upcoming Z Fold 8 devices. So 1 million is a decent number. And like I said, we don't know for sure, but they probably made 200,000 trifolds. So I think this is going to be more popular. I'm going to be honest. Here's my honest take on this. This is more intriguing. I'm looking forward to this wide fold way more than a Fold 8. Again, the size, the cool factor, the dimensions, everything looks pretty freaking awesome. I think 1 million is a decent estimation. Quite honestly, I think this, if they make more, and if they market it right, because that's the other thing. If they can market this thing, if they can get this out there, it's going to go head to head with Apple's foldable. So I know there's going to be a ton of YouTube videos comparing the Apple foldable, Apple iPhone Fold, and the Z Wide Fold. So I know people will know it's out there. I think they're going to be able to sell these. Depending on the price, how much do you think these are going to go for? What do you think is the perfect price point? No to Exynos. We shall see. That's the other thing we don't know, and I think Samsung needs to take a hard look at this, is putting that digitizer under the display that picks up the stylus. I think if they can bring back S Pen support for this Z wide fold, I think that would kill it. I think that would kill it. That would get me wanting really, really bad to get one. They removed S Pen support from the Z Fold 7, and that was a big hit, right? Just simply because they made it so thin. They literally could not put an extra layer, a digitizer layer that picks up a stylus. They have to have a special layer under the display that picks up the little tip of the S Pen. The Fold 7 was so thin, they couldn't even fit it in there. Now, I think the wide fold will be relatively thin, but I don't think they're trying to make it paper thin. So I think they can introduce the S Pen support back into a foldable. If they can do it for one device, one foldable going into the future, this needs to be it. This needs to have an advantage over the Apple foldable, because when you're a competing company, what are your advantages over your competitor, right? I have not heard anything that the Apple iPhone Fold will support the, what do they call it? The Apple Pen. I haven't heard anything in regards to that, meaning the iPhone Fold being compatible with their stylus. If Samsung can bring back S Pen support with this, that's a huge advantage Samsung would have over the competition, right? I'm gonna have to be ready for the wide fold and buy fast on launch day. Yeah, now they are manufacturing more of these than the trifold, because I know those trifolds went out in what, like 2 minutes, right? Which is insane for a $3,000 device, right? I'm assuming it's gonna have a 2K price tag. That was gonna be my estimation. I think they're gonna ask 2K for it slightly more. Because what does the Z Fold 7 go for? Is it 1800? I think it's 1800. Best Buy selling them for 1600. So if you can get, if Samsung can price this at about $19.99, right around 2000, because again, going back to the competition, Apple is going to price theirs right around 2K. So that sounds about right? They don't want to overprice themselves and have people go choose the Apple iPhone Fold, and they don't want to undercut Apple. I'm sure they do a little bit, but if you undercut them too much, you're going to be missing out on profit. So I think 2K is the sweet spot. Now, when is this going to be available? You know, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. Do you think the cameras will be horizontal or vertical? I personally believe they're going to be vertical, but I wish they were horizontal. And for one reason is so it won't wobble when it's closed and on its back. It's like having a Pixel. If you have a Pixel laying naked with no case on a table on a flat surface, there's no wobble whatsoever. If you have a S23 Ultra, if you have an iPhone, if you have even the Motorola Signature laying down on a table, it wobbles when you try and use it, and it sucks. I hate that. I think they're gonna go with a vertical camera array. I think they're going to stick to the same design, the same look as an S23 Ultra, the same aesthetics sort of as the Fold line, right? The Z Fold 7. Now, may not be identical, right? But I think they're going to put them down the side. It's sort of like probably like the S25 Edge. Now, that's a key part of the phone that I think is underrated when it comes to, if you're somebody like myself that loves the design of phones, that loves the way they look, they feel, the aesthetics, that's a very, very, very key part that a phone company could mess up. Because from the surface, looking at the front of this Z wide fold, meaning the front display when it's closed, and looking at it when it's open, It looks beautiful. But turn it around, flip it around, and look at the back. How many times have you seen a really, really nice looking phone? And then you look at the camera setup and you're like, damn, that thing looks ugly as hell. You know? So many phones. It's very rare that I look at a phone, I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. Like the Pixel. Say, y'all can say what you want. I know a lot of people like the way they look. I love the way the Pixel 9 series looks. The Pixel 10s, they're the best looking phones I think ever made. Just visually appealing. I love them. I love the way it just you know exactly what you're looking at when you see a Pixel, right? It'll be interesting to see what they choose and how it will look, the colors, right? All that goes into play. I just hope they put some good sensors on there. You're waiting on the Razer Fold. Yeah, I'm gonna try to grab me one of those that has stylus support. So I'm actually looking to get a stylus. I need to grab one off of eBay. I think they're available right now. Yeah, that's another thing with MagSafe. If they do vertical, because the dimensions of that when it's folded closed, it's almost like a square. You know, you bring up a fantastic point. If it's vertical, it may completely mess up MagSafe and or wireless charging. They would almost not be forced, but placing those cameras is very, very strategic because you're not working with a lot of surface area, right? I mean, it's essentially going to be a square. Look at this thing when it's closed, right? I mean, that the MagSafe ring is going to take up, just imagine a ring and putting it right on the center of the phone there, and then just imagine it being on the back side. You're right. They may have to go horizontal across the top. I hope they do that. I just hope they make it nice looking, visually appealing, right? Because as I mentioned, there's so many phones that you're like, damn, that thing looks cool from the front, but it's ugly as hell from the back. I was going to say, oh, never mind. Never mind. I think you'll know what I was going to say. The Pixel 9s are best looking pixels of all the pixels in my opinion. Yeah, the 6 series was a shock when they came out with the horizontal, but it looks so robotic. The way they have it now, perfect. So we got to the price, maybe around $2,000. Now release date, when is this going to be released? We have no clue. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think it's going to be released and or launched like the Edge, S25 Edge. So in July is when they have their was when they introduced their foldables. The Fold 7, Flip 7 was in July, Flip 6, Fold 6, July, and you can go date back and back and back each year. So I think this July, I think they're going to introduce and or launch the Flip 8 and Fold 8. And then I think they're going to do like a sneak peek, sort of like they did for the S25 Edge. They get up there, they talk about the phones or whatever, and then they said, and look what we've been working on. And then they show some big advertisement, whatever, and kind of introduce to the world the wide fold, right? And then I think it'll probably be launched, and they don't have to have a dedicated launch just for this, just like the Edge, right? They announced it with the release of the S25 series, and then 2 months later they put out a press release, send out a bunch of devices to YouTubers to be reviewed, and then you can just buy them online. I think that's what they're going to do with this, quite honestly. I think they're just going to announce it in July with the other foldables, and then a few months later they'll send out a press release and let everybody know that they are available for sale.